Khaba with the legendary mod is basically an entirely different ship in my opinion. I really disliked playing this ship without the legendary mod, and now that I have it, it's become one of my absolute favorite ships to play. So what does the legendary mod do? Well, it takes up slot 5, which means we're not taking concealment or more than likely the improved steering gears mod 2. So you're going to notice that my rudder is extremely sluggish in this game. But we do get the bonus of 10% extra range and a further 6% better reload time. It also costs 20% consumable action time, so our speed boosts don't last as long, and we don't get quite as much healing out of our heals. But this extra range is so important. It extends the range to close to 15 kilometers, 14.8, somewhere in there, where the normal Khaba only gets up to 13.5. And in tier 10 games, which are pretty passive these days, yeah, 13.5 kilometers of range is not the most comfortable to use in my opinion. And that's why this ship has completely transformed for me when I've run the legendary mod now. The ability to play at range and still be able to impact the game is so nice. And this has become like the old Khaba to me. I remember so many games in this ship where I've been on a flank kiting or pushing and essentially herding the enemy team into a corner. You'll notice this game that the enemy team has zero presence here on the 1, 2, 3 line of the map, and because of that, our team is going to get a huge amount of map control because they don't really have a way of contesting the B cap, and that's a pretty important capture zone if you're looking to win this game. Generally, I think the B cap is a little more important on this flank. But more importantly, this Hanover used his damage control already and doesn't have fire prevention. And I'm assuming doesn't have any of the fire reduction skills in time, so basics of survivability or the damage con mod in the 4th slot, I believe. Because, yeah, we have 3 permanent fires and they're going to give us more than a Witherer's worth of damage. This is the ultimate farm, right? The reason that super battleships are so amazing in World of Warships, they give more damage than a standard battleship. That is the best part about these super battleships, at least as a damage farming destroyer player. That's what I'm trying to be in this game, and it's pretty fun, I'm not gonna lie. There's our Witherer. We've only set this Hanover on fire, and yeah, he goes down very quickly. And a pretty interesting game that I just was herding the enemy team into a corner and ran into a Hanover that gifted me a ton of damage. Yeah, 103k in that short amount of time. It's a very generous donation by this man. But how do I like to play the Khaba? How does it work? Well, I love to go to flanks and I love to push aggressively at the beginning. The ship is hard to hit, so I can play relatively aggressively and use my ship as bait, right? This cruiser, the Azuma on the 2 line here, shoots at me, and I'm easily able to dodge his salvo. Now he's spotted for an entire team to shoot at. We even get some damage in on the destroyer in the cap. That's not normal. Usually it's not a Tashkent in the cap, so I'm usually not able to spot that. But this information gathering that I can do in the Khaba by risking my own ship, essentially. And we take some pain for it, but we have heals for that. It's not a huge deal. We have a 50mm plate on the side of our ship, which also helps us to shatter or even bounce some armor-piercing shells. I really enjoy this Khaba playstyle. It's very active. It's very proactive, I should say, where we're pushing to get information, and there's really never a dull moment in this ship outside of the you've crushed an entire flank and need to go deal with the enemy's flank on the other side of the map, and you're just waiting to get there. That's really the only downtime I get in this Khaba, and it's so much fun. So what have we done here? We've pushed the Azuma away. The enemy battleships haven't been able to take any aggressive positions on this A flank, and we've opened up the 1, 2, 3 lines for us to play comfortably in this off angle, giving us really good shots in on the Tashkent, and essentially forcing him to pick between dying to a Khaba or dying to our 2 Sejongs in the A cap. It's really tough to hold the A cap on this flank when you've lost the 1, 2, 3 lines so heavily. And really there's not much the enemy team could have done outside of the Tashkent not going into the cap and trying to contest my play on this flank. And now that the Tashkent's down, the Azuma is far enough away that his salvos aren't doing too much to us. we get to free farm these battleships again. And that's really what it's all about. Getting these flanks, controlling the side of the map, and just getting in range to farm out the battleships. And having 14.8 kilometers of range really, really helps with that. I can't stress this enough, how comfortable it feels to have this extra range in the Khaba. The reason I didn't play it, and the reason I thought it was a bit of a poor man's Kleber, was because of this lack of range. Even though the Kleber doesn't have the DPM of the Khaba, look at our reload. It's so quick, under 4 seconds with 8 shells that, I mean, they hit pretty hard and have really good fire chance. The Kleber, of course, has really good fire chance and range and shell velocity as well, but the reload isn't nearly as good. It does have that reload booster to give you those bursts of damage, but when it's time to farm a battleship, it's so much nicer to have that consistent DPM. Even though the ship is a bit of a brick to deal with, the speed boost can help dodge salvos, and of course, it's really important to play passive enough that you're not going to take massive hits from the battleships you're farming, or some of the cruisers and destroyers that are supporting them. That's why I always want to be in a position where I'm able to get away, I'm able to turn out without taking too much damage. And even though I would do more damage to these battleships if I'm closer, because the dispersion's not amazing, as you can see. We're missing quite a bit, and it's really not the fault of my aim, I don't think. A lot of it comes down to these random salvos that seem to maybe not be locked on or something. It's kind of odd. But really, it's about playing in this 12 to 14 kilometer range, and yeah, that was nearly 5,000 damage from a single AP salvo into that Yamato, I should say. The AP is no joke here as well, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as time goes on. But just know that giving broadside to a Khaba is a really, really bad idea. In this game, of course, we've done a lot of damage on this flank already, and we've basically won it outside of these cruisers that are really camping the back of the map. And that's what I want to talk more about, the armor piercing and the ammo type selection. AP is really, really good against broadsides, and the HE is just good all around. But I like to use the armor piercing mostly against cruisers, because the HE just can't pin the armor on a lot of these cruisers. And of course, cruiser superstructures are much, much more difficult to hit than battleship superstructures, so I tend to use the AP more. And I also try to get myself on the flank of the cruiser. I force the cruiser to choose to angle to my armor piercing or take a battleship salvo, for example. And you're going to see that as we go through and look at a game where I had to deal with a few more cruisers than this one. But that's really the strategy here, putting myself into a position where I can deal that armor piercing damage into the cruisers, because they're forced to choose between my AP or a battleship or a heavy cruiser AP, for example. And we're going to see that in this game. But first, a Marceau, a very dangerous opponent. A gunboat that I think a lot of people would put on par, maybe even a little better than the Khaba, but not in a long-range gunfight. This is where the Marceau really, really struggles. Against a Kleber, I'd say it'd be a pretty even fight. The better player would probably win, but in this case, I think the Khaba wins this 9 times out of 10. The Marceau shell velocity is so difficult to lead at 10 kilometers, and we're pretty easily able to land shell after shell after shell onto this poor Marceau. And look at that. We've already done about, 17,000 damage, 17,500 damage into our Marceau. We got some help, but not too much. That was a really one-sided fight, and I think it goes to show just how strong the Khaba can be in a lot of these DD fights. And really, as a destroyer player, don't be opening up on a Khaba that's ready to fight. It's a really, really scary target to deal with. Not only is it quick and hard to hit, it has that 50mm plate that will just shatter your shells a lot of the time. Of course, the heal is also very nice. But now we have to deal with a Seattle and a Wu Jing, which is a premium Charles Martel, kind of. It's a bit of an odd ship, but it's a tier 8 heavy cruiser. And of course, it also has very small superstructure, much like the Seattle as well. And that's why I like to use the AP. You'll notice we have a Kearsarge as well as an Ibuki on this flank. And the Kearsarge could have armor piercing loaded. He's probably focused on something else. You can see him killing the Prince Ruprecht. It's really important, though, that I stay on this flank. I really want to force these guys to choose to angle to me or angle to our battleship. And if they choose to angle to me, sure, I'll swap over to the HE and do some chip damage. But it's really these turning broadside cruisers that I want to get this AP into. 2,500 damage from just our back guns alone in that salvo. Not every salvo is going to be amazing, but the damage adds up, and these cruisers can't be affording to take this armor piercing forever. And we'll notice the Seattle already kiting and trying to get away. And I do believe he actually gets away in this scenario, but that's all right. He's been crippled and really can't push in anymore, meaning we have a very good hold on this side. The Wujing can push in, and again, notice where our Kearsarge is positioned. We even have a Des Moines along that angle as well. So me continuing to fire the AP here really forces this Wujing to stay bow in to myself, and maybe we can get some cross shots in from some of our battleships. We do get a little lucky there to dodge the Venezia salvo. That's something that is a little bit spooky when dealing with cruisers. Most of them are just going to have HE or armor piercing that isn't going to do too much to you, but watch out for Venezias. Those things are pretty terrifying. But here we go. The Wujing forced into a difficult position, forced to turn. And yeah, just look at that AP damage stack up. This is why Khaba is still a pretty good ship against cruisers. We're not dealing Citadel damage here, but this AP pen hurts and is certainly not something you want to be taking in a tier 8 heavy cruiser that doesn't even have a heal, I believe. I can't remember actually, but I'm pretty sure that one doesn't have a heal. It's something like a spotter plane that's extra special or something like that. Or deep water torps and a reload boost on those. I can't remember. I do have the ship, but I haven't really played it all that much. And of course, since we've dealt all this chip damage into the Wujing and the Seattle, we're able to push very aggressively into them as the game winds down and essentially get them taken out. Even if it's not us that deals the killing blow here, it's going to be one of our teammates as well. You can see the Des Moines is pushed in relatively aggressively, and this Venezia and Wujing were both forced to angle to him, which opens up a ton of AP damage in for us. Of course, against a Venice, I really don't want to get all my guns on target, especially while he's loaded. Those sap shells are very scary. But it's really not too difficult to deal with a Venice in these situations, since all we have to do is angle completely to him and then hope he has reasonably poor dispersion. And yeah, he does 4k to us, but that's not the end of the world here. And of course, our extra spotting is making him take so much more damage. And just look into this game here and how much damage we managed to do to cruisers. 22k to the Wujing, the Wukong. My goodness, I am getting this completely wrong. The Seattle took a bunch from us as well. I'm sorry about that pronunciation error. That's probably tilting all of you guys. I'll probably see a bunch of comments in about that. Whoopsie. Anyways, on to the next game here. Again, I'm on the flank. I'm dealing with the enemy battleships. Of course, I would be dealing with cruisers and destroyers if they're here as well, but this extra pressure I'm able to apply to this flank forces the enemy team to kite. If they don't have control over the 1, 2, 3 lines, they can't control A. They're caught in crossfires if they're even trying to gain control of the A cap. They can't get away. They're permanently spotted. This Minotaur is not able to get away, constantly taking damage from our team that's honestly camping the back of the map. They're camping spawn, my teammates are, right? And yet we're still going to win this flank because I'm able to play very proactively in the Khaba and gain a ton of information and apply a lot of pressure to the enemy team. This, of course, is not going to work in every game, right? Games are really won and lost by the cap zones. They're not won by just pure damage dealing. But in certain circumstances, the right damage dealing from the right position really is able to apply a lot of pressure to those capture zones and assist your team. We do need DDs to go in and cap, of course, and contest those areas, and I probably would have played that role a little bit more this game had we not had a Holland and a Shimakaze earlier that I think he died relatively quickly, but I could have played that role as well as a second line destroyer. I don't always play these flanks, but I wanted to show you these examples where I was able to play in the open water, flanking, and applying a lot of pressure to essentially herd the enemy team away from this entire flank and away from this capture zone, while getting a lot of damage as well. It's always nice to collect some damage when you're trying to farm in a destroyer. But you'll notice they just didn't have any support in A, and look at that. Our Nevsky is able to walk in for free, essentially. It's very, very useful. And we haven't taken much damage either in this case, so Legendary Mod Khaba gets a firm recommendation from me. Unfortunately, it's extremely expensive to get these days. All the coal required Plus, you need around, what, 20,000 research points? That's 2 resets, or a single reset if you're managing to do that. Take advantage of the double Research Bureau points. That comes up every 3 months or so. If you're doing that, it's not too bad, but still, it's not cheap. And for a ship like the Khaba, you can get basically the same playstyle out of a Kleber, for example. And that one, well, you can grind it for free in the tech tree. But for those of you who do have the Khaba, and maybe you do already have the Legendary mod, and you haven't been playing it, I think you gotta give it a go again. Some of these games aren't possible, though, because there's carriers in them. Carrier games are much, much more difficult. And of course, you have to play a much more passive role. But I really do want to show you these games just because I had so much fun playing Khaba recently, and I wanted to bring it to your attention again. This one went pretty long. The summers managed to run away for a while, but overall, a really good result. As for the commander build on the Khaba, I've gone with a reasonable DPM focused build. I'm not taking full damage output because I do value the extra healing and speed boost I get out of Superintendent and the extra health I'm gaining out of Survivability Expert. Basically, all we're missing, though, is 5% reload, which I think Fearless Brawler is much better with this heal-focused build. If you're going for Smoke Khaba, which I don't really recommend, but it might be a little better into those carrier games, drop Fearless Brawler and take main Battery and AA Expert, simply because you're not getting any benefit out of Fearless Brawler in Smoke. It's basically mandatory for the extra range, though, on the Khaba. It's really hard to play Khaba without extra range, and that's why I really am enjoying the Legendary upgrade. It's awesome, and I should have purchased it sooner. I had a ton of research points laying around, so I bought this kind of on a whim as like, man, I don't play Khaba anymore. I really should try the Legendary mod, and I should have done it sooner. It's awesome. And this is the extra bit of the build that would be a little nicer without the Legendary mod. Our steering is so slow, 9 seconds with the rudder. This Steering Gears mod 2 really tightens up the feel of the Khaba, but can't take it. The Legendary mod is just too good. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, what you think about Khaba in 2022. Maybe you have the Legendary mod. Have you been playing with it? I certainly have had a great time with it so far. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.